Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. They've been with us since our very first season on air in 2021. Walters is located just across the street from the ballpark.
Judge singled his first time. Harper with a good lead at first. Strokes one the other way. Back towards the wall. There it goes. Aaron Judge strikes first for Team USA.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with Washington Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman of NatsJournal.com. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. We are recording this on Thursday afternoon, March 12th, 2 weeks before opening day, and we now know who the Nats starting pitcher for opening day will be. More on that in a bit. And also regarding Nats starting pitching, we have a new Nats starting pitcher, Zack Littell, a guy on whom the Nats have spent some money. A lot to get to on this installment of the podcast. Good to have you with us on what is the only Nats podcast for which there is a new episode for the morning after every Nats regular season game day. We, during spring training, are coming at you on a once per week basis. This installment of Nats Chat is brought to us by the newest album of the Nats Chat theme song composer Tim Newmark. An early reviewer describes the album as packed with extremely deep emotions, kind of like episodes of this podcast. The album is called Evolution. You can find it on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Again, Evolution by the great Tim Newmark. We cheer on Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. Big game Friday night at 8, the U.S. versus Canada in the quarterfinals. And in case you're not aware of this, the ratings for Team USA in the WBC, heck, the ratings overall in this WBC have been outstanding. Monster numbers. The USA victory over Mexico on Monday night, 5.018 million viewers across Fox and Fox Deportes' most watched WBC telecast ever on any network. Mark, people are into this WBC. The games have been really compelling. We've had a lot of Nats tie-ins with what we've seen in this WBC, but I was so happy to see that. Good numbers for these WBC games.
I feel like the last one around, 2023, it kind of flipped this switch. People forget this has been around for 20 years now. It debuted in 2006. And for those first, several versions of it, I think there were some people that were into it and thought it was kind of interesting, but it didn't really capture, I think, the general interest the way that it is now. And I think two things have helped flip that switch. Number one, you started to get bigger name pitchers and bigger name players in general, but especially pitchers now being in this thing. Early on, there was a lot of hesitation from the star players to get involved with this, given the timing of it in spring training. Now you see Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens pitching for them. Obviously, a lineup that includes Aaron Judge and Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, and so many others. So I think that was the first step. The second step was the epic final game last time around between the U.S. and Japan, Ohtani versus Trout. I can only hope that this year we'll have some kind of comparable finish that stacks up to that. It's probably going to be hard to top that. But what we've seen in the preliminary round would suggest that you don't know what's going to happen, because anybody who saw Team Italy being undefeated and winning that group and causing some real panic among Team USA there for about 24 hours, it's really a testament to how far this tournament has come, how deep the talent pool is across a bunch of different nations, and where this thing could still go. And I say this thing, I know it's not WBC, but what I'm really hoping is that this spurs the 2028 Olympics in LA in 2 years to turn into an even bigger event with MLB players in it. It's not official if that's going to happen, but boy, what we've seen here suggests to me that that's the path they should be going down right now.
You can't fake caring, and the fact that Team USA players seem to genuinely care about this, I think, goes a long way. I mean, when you see Paul Skeens out there pitching like and competing like this is a World Series, that carries weight, and I think that has impact, and that's compelling, and it's been good to see. So we'll see if it continues. USA-Canada on Friday night. In the meantime, so the Nats, during the actual offseason, did very little when it came to player acquisitions. But since the start of spring training now, we're looking at multiple notable pitching acquisitions, the most prominent of which happened just a few days ago. The Nats on Tuesday morning announced having signed free agent starting pitcher Zack Littell to a one-year contract with a mutual option for the 2027 season. The contract, per the reporting, including from Mark, is that the contract includes $7 million guaranteed, $3 million for the 2026 season, and then a $4 million buyout for 2027, a mutual option of $12 million for 2027. This coming season, to be Littell's age 30 season, he has pitched for a bunch of teams, 5 MLB teams, has been used as both a starter and a reliever, but he, over the last 2 seasons, has been quite good. Over the last 2 regular seasons, was used as a starter exclusively, pitched for the Tampa Bay Rays and Cincinnati Reds, who got him via trade with the Rays this past July 30th. He made at least 29 starts in each of these last 2 regular seasons, and he, during that stretch, accumulated 6 wins above replacement per Baseball Reference, an ERA of 3.73, and an ERA plus of 111. So he has been durable. He has been effective. He has been an innings eater. There are a lot of things to talk about with this, but one of the principal questions that came to my mind is, why did he last so long on the open market to where he was available to be signed by the Nats more than a week into the month of March?
Right. When you look at the numbers and the track record, at least over the last few years, that says to you, this is a guy who should have had a lot of teams knocking on his door. It was a strange offseason for free agent pitchers. There's still some out there. As we record this, Lucas Giolito does not have a contract yet, and he was much more highly rated than Zack Littell was. So what I gather is that he falls into that category of he's not one of the big name guys. He wasn't going to get a big long-term deal. He's not one of the really cheap guys who you could get on a either minor league deal or just for a couple million. He fell into that middle category, and that's a tough place to be, unfortunately, for free agents. And while we said, the last couple of years, there's a pretty good track record there, he's kind of a late bloomer and was a reliever for the majority of his career. And so maybe teams were a bit scared off by this idea of committing to him as a starter and giving him, quality starter type money. Now, let's be clear, what the Nats are giving him, while that's by their standards in recent years, a pretty healthy amount, it's really not that much in the grand scheme. $7 million. There are some incentives in there that he has a good chance of reaching that could total up over another $2 million. So I don't want to downplay that, but I think he was probably holding out for more, thinking that some team would give him more guaranteed money than that, or even a second guaranteed year. That mutual option, $12 million sounds like a big number. Mutual options hardly ever get picked up as it requires both sides agreeing to it. And usually either the guy is really good and he doesn't pick up the option because he thinks he can get more as a free agent, or he has a bad season and the team doesn't pick it up because they don't think that he's worth it. So it's a little bit convoluted, a little strange. I will say this. He is probably right now, on paper, the Nationals' best starter, or at least has the best track record of any of their starters. Now, he's not going to be the opening day starter. We're going to get into why Cade Cavalli has that assignment. I think if everything goes right, he's going to make his debut Friday night is the plan. He could get 3 starts before the end of spring training. If he's able to build up what they need and they see what they need, I think he could be on track to start the second game of the season for them, and that making him their number 2 starter. That's significant for this team to have a guy this late in the camp you can bring in who might have that kind of role on your team. I think it's a good signing for them. I think he's going to provide them a lot of what they need. Yes, they needed innings, but they needed quality innings. And at least over the last 2 seasons, he has provided that. The other part that I think is important to note here, you mentioned the 2 teams he pitched for last year. Tampa Bay, we know Blake Buchera comes from the Rays organization as well as a few others now with the Nats. And Cincinnati, Simon Matthews, the pitching coach, was their assistant pitching coach last year, worked directly with him. And I'm guessing that connection had something to do with this signing on both ends of the equation. I think it's a good pickup for them. I was a little surprised because I didn't think they were going to do anything else at this point. It didn't seem like they had an obvious vacancy in their rotation. It makes me question maybe some of the other moves they made prior to this one, which we can get into here. But just on the surface, Zack Littell himself for $7 million, I think that's a good pickup for the Nats.
I think it's terrific. And I mean, if you're a contending team, I wonder what you're thinking not getting Zack Littell at that price. I mean, again, the guy has been quite good the last 2 seasons. You can get him for $7 million guaranteed for 1 season. Like, why wouldn't you do that if you have designs on making the postseason? It's a funny deal now. You look at this Nats rotation for all the talk about youth. Zack Littell, veteran. Foster Griffin, his first MLB season as a starting pitcher, but is a guy who's going into his age 30 season. Mikolas, veteran. This actually is just all of a sudden become somewhat of a veteran-laden rotation. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing to follow. And look, here's something else with Zack Littell, and this is not the last time you'll hear me bring this up, but this guy's good enough to where they could flip him, okay? I mean, one-year contract, if this guy pitches at the level he has pitched the last 2 seasons, this guy could be a really nice trade chip here for the Nats. It's bonkers, though, the way free agency in MLB works now. It was not that long ago that if you signed in February, that was considered super late. Now, we see so many guys sign in February, and here's a notable free agent who ends up not signing until March. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of how MLB free agency is these days.
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's funny because we're doing this on the same week that NFL free agency began. And as just a casual fan of it, my head is spinning from those first 48 hours when it's just nonstop. And I'm thinking to myself, do I wish MLB was like this? I don't know that I necessarily would want that because it's so much at once and it's hard to keep up with. But in MLB, you have the complete opposite where it just drags and drags for months and even keeps going into spring training. I don't think that's good for anyone. I don't love that part of it. We'll see in the new CBA whenever they get around to that next winter if maybe there's some changes, maybe some discussion of having an actual window where you can sign guys, because I don't think it's healthy for the sport for it to drag on to this extent. Now, you mentioned, and I think it's an important point, like for a rebuilding team, a team that we knew a month or two ago had major pitching questions, all of a sudden 3/5 of your rotation are veterans. That doesn't quite square up with what we kind of think this team is supposed to be or what their objective is this year. And so to me, I like the Littell signing, but it makes me question, why did they sign Miles Mikolas when they did? And that was in the first week of spring training. Mikolas also a workhorse, more of a track record in terms of the number of years that he's done it than Littell, but he was one of the worst pitchers in baseball last year in terms of ERA, run prevention, you name it. Came a lot cheaper, $2.25 million. You know, hindsight's 20/20, and I'm sure at the time they didn't think they were going to get Littell, at least not at that price. But if you could go back and you're Paul Taboni, would you have signed Miles Mikolas now, along with Foster Griffin? That to me feels like they're going to be clogging up the rotation with veterans who, as you like to term it, might be a path to nowhere and potentially blocking young guys who you do want to get more of a look at least to start the year. And I think it's going to change over the course of the season. I would really prefer, though, that they have at least 3 young starters in this rotation, and in the end, they're only going to have 2.
Well, what's going to be so interesting is, first of all, how these guys perform, but second of all, if one or more is really struggling and is doing, as we have seen, say, you know, a Trevor Williams do or a Patrick Corbin do, does this regime stick with the guy with maddening stubbornness, or is this regime quick and willing to say, okay, bye-bye, next man up? You know, and the Nats are kind of in an odd predicament here with starting pitchers, right? Because we don't know if Josiah Gray is starting the regular season at the major league level. You have guys like Trevor Williams and DJ Hurst who are on the 60-day injured list. When they'll be activated, we don't know. How they will be used when activated, we don't know. But as the season goes on here, there presumably will be additional rotation options. And so you don't necessarily have to be supremely committed to a Miles Mikolas. I mean, to me, the leash should be super short with this guy. You know, I mean, there's no reason to stick with him if he's pitching to the tune of an ERA of 5+. And so that's going to be fascinating to follow. There's also, of course, something like Jake Irvin, younger, innings eater, but, you know, last season was ugly. I mean, how much of a loyalty is this team going to be showing to him? So I do wonder, Paul Taboni, Blake Butera, are they going to have a quicker hook when it comes to struggling pitchers in the rotation as compared to what we saw with Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez?
Yeah, that's my number one question. I'm hoping that that is true. I think it will probably be true, especially in the case of someone like Mikolas, because he's only making 2.25. Now, you're paying a guy like Littell $7 million. You're paying Foster Griffin $5.5 million. You kind of went out of your way to sign Griffin from Japan. They may feel a little more commitment to those two. I would hope that if Mikolas has a bad April, and whether it's Josiah Gray or Brad Lord or Andrew Alvarez, Mitchell Parker, who I think is probably more likely to be in the bullpen, I hope they are willing to open up a spot for one of them if one of them deserves it. and not feel beholden to a Mikolas or one of these other guys. And then the other one, you mentioned him, Jake Irvin. I just wrote about him Thursday morning on natsjournal.com. I would be very nervous if I was Jake Irvin right now. Well, first of all, I don't know that he has locked up a spot in the rotation. I think right now, we know Cade Cavalli's opening day, and then they signed the 3 veterans. So that leaves one spot. I think Irvin's the leader in the clubhouse going into this. He's pitching Thursday night before or after we record this episode. We're recording it now before that. I think it's kind of an important start for him. These next few are. If he can look good, I think he locks it down. If he struggles, I do think they have to consider whether one of the other guys is more deserving. Now, Irvin is making $2.8 million. He's arbitration eligible. He agreed to that deal over the winter to avoid arbitration. That's the kind of situation that in recent years would absolutely guarantee him a spot in the rotation and probably not even have that short of a leash on him. I am fascinated to see. I mean, I hope he does well and doesn't become a question. But if he does struggle, does this new regime treat that differently? I hope the answer to that is yes, he has options. If they want to send him to the minors, they can do that. They'll be paying him a lot more than a AAA pitcher would normally be making. But I think they have to be willing to do that, especially when you have some other young guys who do deserve a look at some point. This could be more of a revolving door than we're used to among the starters. I do think Josiah Gray, they're managing his innings. I think he's going to start the year at AAA, but eventually you do want to see him up here. I think Brad Lord's probably going to the bullpen, but if he pitches well enough, you may want to see him. And again, guys like Alvarez, DJ Hers, whenever he's ready. There's a kid, Luis Perales, who's going to be at AAA, who's been in camp that they acquired. I hope they find a way to make room for these guys and do not feel beholden to veterans, especially if those veterans are not pitching well.
Yeah, we saw some good stuff from Brad Lord as a starter last season. If Miles Mikolas is struggling, it's going to be tough to stomach that with Lord in the bullpen, knowing how well Lord did as a starting pitcher last season.
Hi Nats fans, this is Tim Newmark, DC area composer, longtime Nationals fan, and proud composer of the Nats Chat podcast theme song. If you're enjoying the music and would like to hear more, check out timnewmark.com/streaming or just search for Tim Newmark wherever you listen to music. To find the rest of the song you're hearing now, search for the title Double in the Sun. Go Nats!
Big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp, for partnering with us for this important conversation about mental health.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 show on YouTube. So having a counselor and working with BetterHelp, that gives you an opportunity to really start to unpack. But people don't understand, when you unpack things, you also open up a box that you're not always sure what's inside. So I think that's why seeing a professional is extremely important. If you need someone to open up to, visit BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/89 to get started.
Now the set, the kick, and the pitch. Swing a chopper toward the second base bag. Abrams steps on second, throws to first. Double play. Just what Cade Cavalli needed. That one bounced right to the second base bag. Tailor-made, inning-ending 6-3 double play. And once again, Cavalli gets himself out of trouble.
Look, man, I want to bring in here, we're, as we talk through, like, you know, what we want this culture to be about, what we want our team to be about. Talk about leadership, talk about competitors on the mound at the plate, right? Like, you're the first guy that comes to my mind, Simon's mind, Paul, everybody, our whole staff. With that being said, dude, like March 26th in Chicago, like, that's your game, dude. You're going to go for a starter.
I appreciate that a ton. Thank you, guys.
You ready to roll?
I'm ready to rock, baby.
One man who we know is in the Nats rotation for sure is Cade Cavalli, and we now know that he is the Nats' 2026 opening day starting pitcher. The Nats on Wednesday morning made this announcement, and if you have not yet seen the video, do yourself a favor and see the video. The video is of Blake Butera in his office informing Cade Cavalli that he has been selected as the Nats' opening day starter. The Nats put this out on X on Wednesday, March 11th. The video is only like a minute 10, so it's not much of your time. I'm sure many of you have already seen it, but if you haven't, it's definitely worth a look. And so for Cade Cavalli, first of all, you feel really good for this guy. getting this honor off where we were with him just a year ago, right? I mean, Cade Cavalli, by now I think most people know the story, but number 22 overall pick in the 2020 MLB draft out of the University of Oklahoma. March 2023, undergoes Tommy John surgery on his right elbow. So 3 years ago now, he pitched briefly in the minors in the 2024 season, struggled for AAA Rochester last season. Last August 6th, though, still gets called up from AAA. He had the major league level last regular season of having made just one career MLB regular season start. Had the following stats: 10 starts, ERA of 4.25, WHIP of 1.48. He did not set the world on fire, but what he did was he stayed healthy, and he gave you some stuff with which you can work. And so you said, okay, this is something upon which you can build. And then came this spring training, and it was early in spring training that Blake Butera was raving about the velocity of Cade Cavalli. All indications are he has had a good camp, and now he gets this honor. You know, you think about where we were not that long ago versus where we are now. And yes, a big part of this is Mackenzie Gore has been traded, understood. And yes, a big part of this is Josiah Gray coming off 2 lost seasons of serious elbow surgery. But still, a salute to Cade Cavalli for earning this, because this was not something I think a lot of people were anticipating just a few months ago.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to say he earned it. Now, I understand the conditions as you just described. If Mackenzie Gore's still here, he probably gets that start over him. If Josiah Gray had been healthy the last couple of years and somewhat effective, he's probably ahead of Cavalli on the pitching depth chart as well. But when they drafted him, and this is the old administration now, in the first round in 2020, the idea all along was this could be their long-term number one starter. He has the stuff of a number one starter. We've talked about that. His fastball was averaging 97 this spring. It topped out at close to 100 miles an hour. He combines that with a really good curveball, a sweeper that he's added now, a changeup. I mean, he fits the profile of what you think a big league ace should look like and should pitch like. Now, he has to prove that at the big league level in a way that he has not yet. But if you watched those 10 starts last August and September when he came up, you saw what everybody has always raved about. There were individual starts that looked great. There were moments in those other starts that also looked great. It's now a matter of him putting it all together for them. Above all else, he wants to be that guy. He has always thought of himself as a number one starter. He's a very charismatic kid. And I say kid, he's 27 already, even though he only has 11 big league starts. And that video of him and Blake Butera is only 6 years older than Cade Cavalli at 33 to 27. They're almost contemporaries, which is fascinating to consider because you wouldn't think of a manager and a big league pitcher in those kind of terms. He's looked great this spring. I think it's an important distinction, both practically speaking, it was all set up, I think, for him to be the guy. But I think emotionally, it's an important declaration by the team. They're saying, we're not doing the old Patrick Corbin veteran with a track record gets the opening day assignment. It wasn't going to be Miles Mikolas. Who knows if they had signed Zack Littell earlier, that might have changed the calculus, but I'm guessing it probably wouldn't. I think they wanted to say, hey, here's the guy we're now going to be following. Here's the guy who's going to carry us on his shoulders and lead this pitching staff. You heard that in Blake's message to Cade when he told them of the news. It's up to Cavalli to go out there now and prove that he can finally be this guy that we've always believed he could be. But I think the timing is right. I think he's done everything that he could over the last year to show that he is ready for this. And I can't wait to see him pitch every fifth day in the big leagues and see what this looks like now.
The stuff plays. I mean, if he stays healthy, there really is no reason he can't be the pitcher he was drafted to be. And it really is amazing when you look at really successful starting pitchers in MLB. There is no one formula. Like, everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different path. If he does become a quality MLB pitcher, his would be one of the more unique paths where you get drafted in 20. You're not a true mainstay in the rotation until 26. You overcome all this missed time off the Tommy John surgery. Like, this was not looking good. This was looking like a bust. This was looking like another whiff of a pick by Mike Rizzo. And maybe it'll still prove to be that. We don't know yet. But right now, Cade Cavalli is in a good place, and it's exciting to see that. And I'm pumped for him. You work your tail off to get to a point like this off where he was. I have a lot of respect for someone who does that. Now, I do want to ask this about Josiah Gray. So he is going to be on a workload limit this season. The thinking seems to be here they're going to be starting his season later. Why not start his season on time? Because if he gets injured at some point in the season, and I'm not talking about an elbow injury, but, he sprains an ankle, he pulls a hamstring, whatever, he has to miss a few starts, then that right there might bring us to where he is in accordance with the workload limit. Like if you wait to start him and he suffers some sort of minor ailment that costs him multiple starts, he may never get to the workload limit that you had set for him in the season. Why do you think the Nats are doing it this way, where they're waiting to start his season as opposed to starting it from the get-go?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think you have to be careful not to describe this as them like really delaying his season debut that much. My guess is that he's going to be in the rotation at AAA to start the year. Now maybe, their season starts a few days later. Maybe they hold him back to the number 5 start. So, it may be a week or so after he would have pitched in the big leagues, but he has pitched in big league games now this spring. He clearly isn't going as far. It's like, I think he hasn't topped 35 or 40 pitches in a start yet. So that seems pretty clear that they're not grooming him to be part of the opening day rotation. I think if he starts at Rochester, whether it's the first week of the season or the second week of the season, they can at that level say, we're holding you to 4 innings, 5 innings, 75 pitches, whatever that is, in a way that you can't do at the big league level. Now, I hope that we're not talking about months where that's the case. I hope we're just talking about April at most, maybe a little bit into May. If he is pitching, every 5-6 days in Rochester and is healthy and is having some amount of success, I want to see him in the big league sooner rather than later, even if that means he hits an innings limit come August, September, whatever that might be. I don't think it's helping him to just stash him away at AAA for any real length of time. I think it's just about trying to manage the innings early on to conserve some up for later on in the year. But I get what you're saying, and you are kind of taking a gamble, rolling the dice a little bit here. If anything else were to happen, you may get to a situation where he doesn't have the opportunity to build up to what you want, and that could affect his workload, going into 2027.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have designs on, let's be honest, contending for a pennant, okay, then you can just do this in a way where it's like, all right, let's start him at the major league level to begin things here. And, if he reaches the limit, he reaches the limit. But, we know how it goes with these guys. You miss a start here, you miss a couple of starts there, you have a blister, you have to miss a few weeks. Like, you never know with this stuff. So I'm interested to see what they end up doing with Josiah Gray. I feel like this gets forgotten. He was an all-star in his last truly healthy season. Like, if all things are equal, he should be the opening day starter, period. There shouldn't even be a debate about that. He's the opening day starter if he's healthy and everything is equal. Everything, of course, is not equal right now because he's coming off not 1 but 2 lost seasons here. So this is, a delicate situation in terms of how you handle him. But he was an all-star. He was the Nats' best starting pitcher in that 2023 season. You'd like to think that that's still the guy who we're looking at here.
Yeah, he's kind of been lost in the shuffle here. I think we tend to forget about him and just think of him as like, oh, well, if he does turn out to be anything, that's great. No, you're right. He was supposed to be, if not their ace, but like their number 2 or number 3 starter, right behind Cavalli and Gore. Maybe that was the grand plan a couple of years ago. That didn't happen. Doesn't mean it can't still happen for him. All the signs have been good this spring. He has been healthy. He's thrown with some velocity, mid-90s. I think he throws a lot of different pitches, which is fine. He may be somebody who benefits from an approach of throwing fewer fastballs than the average big league starting pitcher would because he has such a deep repertoire. And this pitching staff, the coaching staff, seems to be really on board with the mindset of you don't have to all do it one way. If you're better with breaking balls and off speed and changeups, focus on that. You don't have to throw fastballs all the time. So, like I said, even if he does open here at AAA, like I believe that he will, I really do hope we see him in DC within a month. And let's find out, number 1, is he healthy again? But number 2, can he go back to being the pitcher that he was in 2023, which earned him the opening day assignment in 24 before the elbow injury? I get why they want to slow play that. They want to be careful, but let's not forget about him altogether. And as I said earlier, I don't want Miles Mikolas, Foster Griffin, or even Zack Littell to be standing in the way of Josiah Gray making 20 plus big league starts this year.
We could have multiple legitimate trade candidates for the Nats come that deadline in the way of Foster Griffin and Zack Littell and maybe Miles Mikolas. Who the heck knows? We'll never forget John Lester and his 5+ ERA being flipped come that 2021 deadline.
Littell has that unique ability to throw the split finger on both sides of the plate and just nudge it downward.
And then he became the anchor of a banged-up Rays staff before being dealt to the Reds this season. 1-2. Struck him out. Well, the split gets Tucker to surrender. First K for Littell as a Red.
All right, so we are getting closer to the regular season. We are getting closer to the Nats' first true season without being on MASN here. Some games have been on Nationals.tv during spring training, but come the regular season, that's going to be primarily how you watch Nationals baseball, Nationals.tv. For those of you who have not yet looked into this, Nationals.tv online is how you can find out more information of the pricing. $100 for the season when it comes to just Nationals.tv. $200 for the season if you want Nationals.tv and MLB.tv. So in that case, you get not just Nats games, but the entire 2026 MLB regular season. Streaming is not new anymore. You know, so many people now have cut the cord and are in on streaming. I think it's going to be so interesting to see how many people, in fact, subscribe to Nationals.tv. Now, that's not data that we're going to get. Let's be honest. Most of this stuff never gets released unless the numbers are so good that the outlet is just like beaming with pride and put something out there. But I do think that is going to be fascinating. Like, what is the number of subscriptions for Nationals.tv in this season? The other thing, though, to be monitoring with this Nationals.tv situation is this. So Nationals.tv, the idea at least had been for it to be available via certain cable and satellite providers. And we have not had any word yet on if/when that will be the case, where that might be the case. We're getting closer to the regular season. Do you think it's still safe to assume that Nationals.tv will be available on at least some cable and or satellite providers?
Yes, I do. I think it's going to be on a majority of the major providers in our region. I know how frustrating this is for everyone. I'm waiting myself to find out, where exactly is it going to be, because you may not need to fork over the $100 to get the streaming option only. I'll say this, and it's not just a company line. I've noticed this in previous years with other teams that were already in this situation, teams whose RSNs went under and MLB took over the rights. In pretty much every case, they don't come out and announce any of these cable and satellite deals until like a couple of days before the season opener. And I expect that to be the case here. That's frustrating. I'm sure everyone's like, they've known for months this is happening. Why does it take this long? Well, because there is zero reason for a cable system to have a Nationals TV station on their lineup yet, because there's nothing to be shown aside from a handful of spring training games. This is going to be a network that only shows the games and whatever pre and post game shows they have, and maybe a replay of last night's game or immediately after it's over, they may air it again. This is not a 24/7 sports channel that you're going to see other programming on. My understanding, and again, this is both based on how the Nationals are approaching it, but also what's happening in all these other cities. There are almost half the league is now going to be on one of these MLB owned and operated stations. My understanding is the vast majority of the primary cable providers out there, Comcast, Cox, DirecTV being satellite. I think YouTube TV might be the one major one that doesn't end up with it. That's more of a YouTube MLB situation that doesn't necessarily have to do with the Nationals. This is being negotiated by MLB, not by the Nationals themselves. But I do believe that for the most part, those systems are going to have a Nationals TV channel on their regular sports tier. Wherever you have been getting MASN all these years, you should be getting Nationals TV on that same tier. And while it's not official, there are some hints here that MASN 2, which was a network that existed for the last 20 years because the Nats and Orioles were both on at the same time very often, has no need to exist anymore, and it's starting to drop off of those channel listings for different cable companies. It would stand to reason, I don't know this for a fact, but it stands to reason, it makes sense, that Nationals TV would be taking over that channel right alongside MASN. So again, you're not going to know until right before opening day. I know that causes anxiety for a lot of fans out there. If you're that worried about it and you can't wait, go ahead and pay the $100 and you get it streaming. If you are willing to wait, and the price isn't going to go up if you wait until the last minute, you can still sign up in a matter of minutes on opening day if you need to and still get the game. I would hold out, find out if it's going to be on your cable or satellite system. Chances are, if you have one of the major providers, it will be on it. But chances are you're not going to know until 48, 72 hours before the season opener.
I wonder, of the people listening to this podcast, how many still have cable? Like, is it a majority of our listeners? Is it now a minority of our listeners? I know in my life, I know so few people who have cable anymore. Like, everyone I know now has streaming. So, it's a big deal whether Nationals.TV is on cable/satellite systems, but maybe it's not as big of a deal as we're thinking, just because so many people have cut the cord in recent years. The other thing, too, you can do is go monthly. You don't have to buy an entire season subscription for Nationals.TV. You can pay $20 a month and do it that way, but you get a cheaper per month rate if you pay the $100 for the entirety of the season. So we'll see here. I think that this is going to be so interesting in so many ways. Among them is this. Do we get enhanced production value via this being run by MLB? Is this still kind of what we were used to with MASN? What kind of a pregame show do we get for Nats games? What kind of a postgame show do we get for Nats games? Are we talking bare bones operation, or are we talking about something that's compelling and something that becomes like must-see viewing? So there's an opportunity here to do this well. Now, the fact that this is only going to be pregame show, game, postgame show, as opposed to ancillary programming, I find that disappointing, but understandable. This is a startup, so you want to kind of start slow and make sure you do this right. It would be nice if at some point maybe you had additional Nats programming beyond just games and pre- and post-game shows on Nationals.TV. But, let's crawl before we can walk and run. I understand that. But this is something new. This is a new frontier, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here, so we'll see.
Al, for the 5 years that we've done this podcast, I have not really been able to talk much about Nationals TV on MASN because I was an employee of MASN. As everybody out there knows by now, I'm no longer an employee of MASN. So maybe I feel a little more free to discuss some of these matters. I'm not going to badmouth MASN. They treated me extremely well. I have no complaints about anything there. But as we look forward to what's ahead, what I can tell you is this. I think what we've already seen in the spring training broadcasts, we know that the personnel, it's Dan Kolko and Kevin Franzen on the broadcast, and Alexa Dat is now the sideline reporter. My understanding is that Alexa will also be the pre- and post-game host. So the role is going to be very similar to what Dan Kolko had done the last several years. So yes, during the game, she's in the dugout, providing insight and updates on things, but she's also going to be solo hosting a pregame show and a postgame show. No analyst alongside her, no ex-player, no writer analyst like somebody like myself scheduled to be a part of that broadcast. I also believe that pregame show is going to be minimal. And by minimal, I mean like 15 minutes. They start home games at 6:45, the weeknight games. I think they're coming on the air at 6:30, and I would not count on getting pregame shows for road games for the most part. I think you're just looking at pregame at home and only 15 minutes. I believe postgame shows will be a full 30 minutes and home and road, and that'll be a combination of Alexa on the field, maybe Dan and Kevin in the booth sharing their thoughts as well. You'll have, the manager's press conference, some player interviews from the clubhouse. But I think it's going to look a lot like what you saw on MASN the last few years. I think the biggest difference you're going to see is the graphics. It's going to look like MLB Network. You've seen all the other teams, and it's a very similar style looking broadcast. I can also tell you that most of the crew, not on air, but the behind the scenes people, are holdovers from the broadcast crew that was with them for MASN, many of them there for 20 years. So the personnel behind the scenes is very similar to what we've seen in the past. So if you were going into this and hoping to yourself, boy, I think Nationals TV is going to look and sound a whole lot different from what I remember at Masson. I'm here to tell you it's probably not. It's probably going to be fairly similar to that. Now, it's MLB produced, so there are some different things that they have, the graphics and a few other, things that they're going to have that'll be similar to what other teams in the same situation have. But it may not look all that different from what you've become accustomed to, for better or worse, over the last 20 years on Masson.
So let's be clear about this. This being bare bones, which is basically what you just described, certainly from a pregame show standpoint. If the Nats wanted something more extravagant from a pregame show standpoint, could they do that? Or is this being run by MLB to where this is an MLB decision and not a Nats decision?
I think both sides are in on that equation. I think MLB seems to prefer relatively minimal pregame stuff. I think the numbers show that pregame shows don't make a lot of money. People are not tuning in beforehand. They may stick around afterwards for postgame shows because they want to hear what the manager has to say, what the players have to say, and, ideally some analysis of that game. I think they're finding, especially as teams move start times up from 7:05 to 6:45, 6:35 in some towns, that people are not tuning in a half hour prior to that to watch a full pregame show. And I don't know this for a fact, but when you're talking about MLB and MLB Network essentially being in control of these broadcasts, well, they have their own programming and their own pregame show that they probably are trying to encourage people to watch before they flip over to the individual team broadcasts. So from their standpoint, it may hurt their cause to try to invest in a more significant pregame show, because that may be taking away their own viewers. Now, if the Nats were adamant about it, and some other teams may be adamant about, hey, we want 30 minutes, we want to go a bigger deal with that, and we have the numbers to show that it's worthwhile and will make money for us, I don't think MLB would stand in the way of that happening. But I think MLB is perfectly fine with the minimal, especially on the pregame side of it. Sports broadcasting has changed a lot just in the 20 years that the Nats have been around. And as much as we all wish it was still the same way that it used to be, it's not the moneymaker that it was. We know how cable subscriptions have gone way down. The streaming option, while maybe better for fans, is not financially as lucrative for the teams as they used to be. So for all those complaints all those years about the Nats are getting screwed because of Masson, while that may have been true, this switch doesn't necessarily help them that much from a financial standpoint. It arguably is going to produce even less money than they were getting from Masson. And that's why it's really more about the bigger picture a few years down the road, when MLB hopes to package together a majority, if not the entire league, and sell that as one big package where every team's making the same amount of money from it.
Yeah, and for all the talk for all of those years of if only the Nats could get off of Masson, if only the Nats could not be on Masson, what if the Nats weren't on Masson? What would that look like? What would that be like? Well, our answer in 2026 actually looks a lot like the Nats being on Masson. The Nats being on Masson hurt them from a financial standpoint. The Nats were not reaping the benefits of the RSN boom of, 10, 12, 15 years ago. But from a broadcasting standpoint, I don't know that things would have been much different, certainly from what you're just describing right there. I mean, it sounds like, we probably would have seen a lot of the same stuff that we have been seeing for years with the Nats on Masson, just, on another RSN. And now we'll be seeing that here on nationals.tv. Well, we're interested in what you think about all of this. I mean, again, this is more of a regular season conversation, but, your impressions of nationals.tv, your experience with nationals.tv. You could always find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find Mark on X at Mark Zuckerman. You can find me on X at Al Galdi. The podcast is on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast, and you can email us to natschatpodcast@gmail.com. Before we go, we do want to salute one of our all-time favorites on this podcast, former National starting pitcher and relief pitcher Paolo Espino, who is retiring. Paolo Espino, who famously in the 2021 season was christened the Secret Weapon by manager Davey Martinez, and that became such a thing that Tim Shovers put together a T-shirt for Paolo, the Secret Weapon T-shirt for the Nats Chat podcast. He has decided to retire after 19 seasons in professional baseball. He's retiring after the World Baseball Classic is over. Paolo Espino, a 10th round selection of the Cleveland Indians in the 2006 MLB draft. Didn't make his MLB regular season debut until 2017. Pitched for the Nats 2020 through 2023. His age 33 through 36 seasons, and he became a bit of a thing during that 2021 season as both a reliever and as a starter. And, we had some fun with Paolo because, he kind of looked like the everyman, and the name, kind of felt like the name of someone who might be your neighbor. And, he was a guy in his early and mid 30s who was set to be under team control until he was about 57. And, there were all kinds of jokes that we made, but he did a good, admirable job. It was a thrill having him on the podcast in 2021. Was a very nice guy. You obviously got to know him a little bit in covering him. And so we did want to send a proper goodbye and a proper thank you to Paolo Espino for being a cherished part of the history of the Nats Chat podcast.
If you haven't seen the video of it, his final outing for Team Panama, his birthplace, he pitched in the very first World Baseball Classic for them in 2006. 20 years later, was pitching for them again, and had, I think it was 4 1/3 scoreless innings for them. And their manager came out, took the ball from him. He walked off the field in San Juan, Puerto Rico, to a standing ovation from the crowd and from his teammates. He had already announced that this was it for him. That was his final appearance as a professional pitcher. What a wonderful way for that to go out. I know it's an unconventional career, and the number of baseball fans out there who are going to remember a lot about him is probably pretty small, but those of us who got to know him and got to see him pitch for the Nationals know what a genuine good person he was, how he just stuck with it all those years. He told me he could have quit many times, but he didn't want to because he loved it too much. And if that meant signing another minor league deal with some other organization and going and spending the year at AAA and never knowing if you're going to get called up or not, that was fine with him. He would rather do that and keep his career going as long as he could. The Nats gave him an opportunity that pretty much nobody else did to actually be in the big leagues for any real length of time. He got to start, he got to relieve, he got to save a game for them. That's how he got that nickname of the secret weapon. No, the numbers aren't anything special. The stuff wasn't anything special. But guys like Paolo Espino make the sport great and really make the WBC great. He wasn't the only one. You saw other pitchers, the guy from the Czech Republic getting the huge ovation as he walked off the mound in Japan. All these great stories that came out of this tournament. I was really happy personally to see Paolo Espino get to have his one final moment walking off the field. Salutes to him on a really fabulous career. And I know he wants to stay involved in the game in some way. I would not be surprised if we see him coaching in some capacity.
And, of course, there are so many Paolo Espinos throughout professional baseball, and that's kind of the point, too, that this is the backbone of professional baseball. People like Paolo Espino who stick with it and who are determined and who aren't necessarily known beyond, like, their own household, but still, they deserve a lot of respect. This installment of Nats Chat brought to us by the newest album by Nats Chat theme song composer Tim Newmark. An early reviewer describes the album as packed with extremely deep emotions. The album is called Evolution. You can find it on all of your favorite streaming platforms come September 26th. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast, and we're going to leave you with Paolo Espino, him with us during the summer of 2021, discussing the moment that he had most enjoyed from his time with the Nats.
I was definitely looking forward for the first win. The first save, I wasn't sure that was going to happen. It came through, but I was definitely looking forward for the first win. And I think that one might stick around for a little longer. But, I don't know if I'm going to get another save opportunity. So that save one is going to be pretty awesome, too. It's going to stay in my head for a long time.
Man, look at Christian Bethancourt. He wants an ovation from his dugout and the fans behind it for the 39-year-old. And what a moment for Paolo Espino as Jose Mayorga is out to get him in the final start, potentially, of his baseball life.